His ex-aunt and I found out we were pregnant on the same day. Chris was overjoyed. He said he wanted to give us each a gift, so he drove Jane's mom out that night to get her an expensive gold bracelet. I waited expectantly, only to receive a signed abortion consent form the next day. Ashley, have this child aborted? I've already scheduled the abortion. Rest well these next 2 days, and next Monday at 2 p.m., I'll come pick you up to take you to the hospital for the procedure. I looked at him in disbelief, my eyes red as I asked him why, but he looked with tenderness at his ex-aunt, who was sitting to the side, grinning from ear to ear. Jane looked at me with disdain, her words lacking any respect. Of course it's because Chris wants to take care of me. My sister was Chris's first wife, and before she died, she repeatedly told Chris to take good care of me. What are you? Just a later addition through a second marriage. What right do you have to come before my sister's will and mine? In short, if Chris tells you to abort it, then abort it. Why so many questions? If my sister were still here, she would undoubtedly support whatever decision Chris made. She wouldn't be like you, asking questions all the time, with no traditional values at all. Chris helped her up, his gaze towards me utterly cold. Jane is right. I need to take care of her. I don't have the time to spare to take care of you. The abortion is settled. If you want kids, we can have one after Jane's baby is born safely. Also, from today onwards, move out of this mansion. Before Jane passed away, Jane told me that if Jane ever got pregnant, I should bring her to live in this mansion. She prepared many gifts in this mansion for Jane to celebrate, so it won't be convenient for you to live here. After your surgery, I'll have someone take you to another mansion to live. Don't worry, I'll come visit you when I have time. Chris's eyes were deep as they landed on me, waiting for my response. I pursed my lips, silently refusing his arrangement. It was the first time in 5 years that I hadn't replied to him. After a moment of silence, Jane suddenly frowned and slumped onto the sofa, her slender hand reaching for Chris. Chris, my head suddenly feels dizzy. I wonder if it's because of all this fuss. Can you take me upstairs to rest? Chris frowned, picked her up in his arms, and walked straight upstairs, passing by me. Before his figure disappeared around the corner of the stairs, he didn't forget to instruct the housekeeper to pack my luggage. Housekeeper Lucy walked over to me, her face expressionless. Ms. Lynn, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Doe said that all of your things must be moved out, and I'm to keep an eye on you, in case you mistakenly take anything that belongs to the late Mrs. Smith. She was brought here by Chris's late wife, Jane, and like Jane, she didn't show me much respect. Perhaps it should be said that no one in this mansion had much respect for me, so for 5 years, they had always addressed me as Ms. Lynn. And Jane, this person who had been dead for 5 years, was the true Mrs. Smith in their hearts. I had mentioned this to Chris more than once, but as long as it concerned Jane, he seemed like a completely different person. Ashley, I said I could marry you, but don't you ever dream of replacing Jane's position. You are Mrs. Smith, but you are also not Mrs. Smith. I hope you can understand your place. These were Chris's words to me the first time I showed dissatisfaction with being called Ms. Lynn. I smiled bitterly and followed housekeeper Lucy upstairs to the second floor. I didn't have many belongings, so packing was easy. When I was tidying up at the vanity, I immediately noticed the ring that Chris had personally put on my finger when we got married. The men's ring was quietly lying in the box, still brand new, while the women's ring on my hand had become somewhat dull after years of wear. After thinking it over, I took it out of the room, wanting to find Chris. I still wanted to fight for the child in my belly. But as I passed by the 3rd floor, in the room where his late wife used to live, I heard deliberately suppressed, tender, and coquettish sounds. Chris, be careful, it wouldn't be good to hurt the baby. Through the crack in the door, Jane was leaning on the bed, whimpering coquettishly. Chris raised his head from the end of the bed, his lips glistening with an ambiguous sheen. My heart suddenly ached, my breath caught in my throat, and tears instantly welled up in my eyes. I had never imagined that the care Chris spoke of would be this kind of care. Inside the room, Chris started moving again. He seemed to particularly enjoy Jane's coquettish appearance, his gaze lingering as he reached out to brush the sweaty hair from her ear. I had seen him brush his hair countless times in various situations over the past 5 years, but I never thought that one day I would see them in bed. Jane, I miss you so much. With Jane's groan, Chris finally stopped moving. He leaned over and hugged the somewhat dazed Jane tightly, constantly calling out Jane. I knew he was looking at the person who lived in his heart through Jane again. 5 years had passed, and I hadn't waited for Chris to open his heart to me, but I had waited for Chris to mess around with this cousin who looked like his late wife. My heart was blocked with a breath, making me feel uncomfortable and nauseous. I walked downstairs unsteadily. Housekeeper Lucy had a stern face and was very serious. Ms. Lynn, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Doe instructed that no irrelevant person is allowed to go to the 3rd floor without permission. That's where the late Mrs. Smith lived when she was alive, and it's not allowed to be disturbed by others. How could you go upstairs without Mr. Smith's permission? What if you touched something the late Mrs. Smith liked and made her unhappy in heaven? I looked at her, my face pale, and walked back to the room dejected. Edley, I know, it won't happen again. Please don't tell Chris that I went upstairs just now. I'm afraid it will remind him of the sad past. Don't worry, I just wanted to go to the study to talk to him about something, but I didn't see him, so I came down. I didn't touch anything else. I closed the door and slumped to the ground, leaning against it. 5 years ago, Grandpa Smith found my family and proposed the idea of marriage. At that time, Chris's late wife, Jane, had only passed away from illness less than half a year prior, and the news of Chris's multiple suicide attempts due to missing his deceased wife had spread like wildfire online. This led to no one in the upper circles being willing to marry into the Smith family anymore, as who would be willing to marry their precious daughter to someone intent on dying? So Grandpa Smith found me, a girl from a small family who was about to face family bankruptcy and debt, and whose father was seriously ill and had no money for treatment. He sat in front of me, speaking earnestly. When you came to the company for an interview, I knew at a glance that you were the one, and so far, you're the only one who can do it. That Chris is stubborn. If he doesn't have someone understanding by his side, I'm really afraid he'll do something stupid. His aged eyes saw through my thoughts completely. Grandpa knows that you liked Chris very much before he got married. Grandpa doesn't ask you to continue liking him. I only ask you to save his life. Of course, in return, I can help your parents with the cost of the special medicine. I agreed. On the one hand, my family did need Grandpa's help, and on the other hand, I genuinely liked Chris, even before he and Jane got married. The door was opened from the outside, and I wiped away my tears in a flustered manner and stood up. Backlit, Chris couldn't see my face. He frowned. Housekeeper Lucy said you were looking for me? I looked up at Housekeeper Lucy, who was standing at the STA case, and when our eyes met, she quickly looked away. I opened my mouth. Yes, why would she take my words to heart? I wasn't the Mrs. Smith in her heart. Not only not in her heart, but not in Chris's heart either. Chris walked past me with Jane and looked around the room, finally sitting down on the sofa. Have you packed everything? In the future, no matter what you need me for, you're not allowed to go to the 3rd floor again. If you can't find me, call me, understand? His slightly oppressive gaze landed on me, making it hard for me to breathe. Got it, it won't happen again. Chris gave a satisfied hum and casually lit a cigarette. When you went up just now, did you see anything? I was stunned and looked up at him, only then realizing that he was testing me. I swallowed my dry throat and shook my head. I didn't see you in the study, so I came down. In the silence, I took a deep breath, holding back my tears and suppressing the bitterness in my heart. Chris, I want to keep this child. Chris's hand, which was flicking ash, paused. He slowly exhaled a smoke ring, thinking about something. Seeing him hesitate, a glimmer of hope ignited in my heart. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. I definitely won't bother you. Before I could finish speaking, Jane suddenly exclaimed, taking a few steps away from Chris and waving her arms. Chris, why are you smoking again? Have you forgotten what the doctor told you at the hospital yesterday? Chris froze and immediately apologized, putting out the cigarette. Sorry, it was my fault. I won't smoke anymore in the future. Jane smiled and reached out to poke his forehead. That's more like it. You never smoked when my sister was around, but now. Her gaze turned to me, her disgust undisguised. Ashley, what kind of wife are you? Smoking is bad for the lungs, don't you know that? You just watched Chris smoke without saying anything. I don't know why Grandpa Smith found someone like you to be Chris's second wife. Back then, she sneered. You want to have a child with your abilities? You can't even take care of your husband. How can you possibly take care of a child on your own? When my sister was pregnant, she was worried that Chris wouldn't be able to handle both the company and the family, so she hid it from Chris and took care of herself for a while, but in the end, even someone as careful as my sister couldn't manage, let alone you? Or do you think you can be more careful than my sister? Her words successfully stirred up Chris's sadness. His face darkened, and his tone left no room for doubt. Ashley, you can't keep this child. My heart was twisted into a knot, and the grievances and despair poured out uncontrollably. Why? Didn't you say you wanted to have a child with me? That was 3 years after we got married. For 3 years, Chris and I had been respectful to each other and occasionally intimate. It seemed that I had healed him. He no longer did things to harm himself, nor did he have any thoughts of suicide. The smell of smoke and alcohol on him had been replaced by the pleasant scent of men's cologne, and he would hold me in his arms and fall asleep peacefully after intimate nights. One night, he suddenly told me, Ash, let's have a baby. I heard my heart pounding wildly. After that night, Chris and I were completely honest with each other. There was only each other between us, without any barriers. But everything changed after Jane appeared. She returned from America 2 years ago. As soon as she returned, she contacted Chris, crying and saying that she had gotten divorced. From then on, Chris changed. He became the person who only had Jane in his heart and eyes again. He even hated me. I knew you were up to no good. Look at what kind of person you are, yet you dare to dream of replacing Jane in my heart. Dirty, lowly. He didn't acknowledge me as his wife, and he threw a signed divorce papers at me. He also didn't allow Grandpa Smith to include me in the Smith family tree. Moreover, every Memorial Day, he would have people force me to kneel before Jane and apologize. Jane said that this was what I deserved, because I had ill intentions and wanted to replace her sister's position. She said that her sister was Chris's first wife, and I was just a second marriage, so I had to pay respects to her sister, calling it, showing respect as a junior wife. What's the difference between a second marriage and a lowly concubine who can't be brought to the table in ancient times? Letting you pay respects to my sister is a bargain for you. If it were anyone else who wanted to replace my sister's position, Chris would have ruined her reputation long ago. It's just you, getting a bargain and still acting like you didn't want to marry into the Smith family and become a rich wife. Dare to say, you never thought about marrying Chris? I didn't dare to say it, because I used to want to marry Chris. But I didn't want to replace Jane in Chris's heart. I just hoped that Chris could open his heart to me a little, even if it was just a little, I would be overjoyed. But I knelt in front of Jane's grave, my forehead bruised, and I didn't get a single glance from Chris. He would only say, Ashley, it's because you have impure thoughts. You must kneel to Jane and confess your sins. My thoughts were pulled back by Chris's cold voice. No. He looked at me, word by word, his face full of disgust. I never wanted to have a child with you. Ashley, someone like you doesn't deserve to give birth to my child. My head buzzed, and there was a constant ringing in my ears. Chris personally denied the 3 years we had been together. After saying these words, Chris left. Before leaving, he forcibly took off the ring from my finger. Wear this ring again when you have cleansed your heart. My finger was empty, and my heart, which had been barely holding on, was also empty. I couldn't enter Chris's heart, and I finally couldn't hold on to my attachment to him any longer. Jane smirked, forcefully shoving me with her shoulder, without fear. You think you can give birth to Chris's child? I don't know where you got the nerve to even think about it. I'm telling you, if Grandpa Smith hadn't interfered, the one sitting in the Mrs. Smith position right now wouldn't be you. She approached me, smiling maliciously. After all, I have a face that looks 8 parts like Jane. And you? Ashley, what do you have? You wouldn't be so presumptuous as to think that Chris has forgotten Jane and fallen in love with you, would you? My vision was blurry, and Jane's smiling face overlapped again and again in front of me. Upstairs just now, you saw it all, right? Has Chris ever been that gentle with you? Has he ever? She suddenly pulled down her collar, revealing dense red marks scattered on her fair neck. Has he ever left any traces of love on you? The taste of iron spread in my mouth. No, never. Chris had never left any attachment on me, and he had never said any words of affection, love, or like to me. Let me tell you secretly, just now when Chris and I were doing it in the room where Jane used to live, after Chris calmed his breathing, he hugged me and said, "Jane, I love you." Ashley, guess how much longer you can sit in the position of Mrs. Smith. She looked outside, turned back, and smiled at me, taking out 3 white pills from her pocket. Ashley, how about we experiment? It just so happens that I don't want this bastard child that doesn't belong to Chris either. Can you help me, please? She raised her hand and swallowed the pills, reaching out towards my stomach with her other hand. Instinctively, I covered my stomach with one hand and dodged, trying to stop her hand with the other. But at this moment, she changed her target, using both hands to pull my hand towards her face to slap it. I reached out with my other hand to stop her, but she kept entangling me. During this time, she kept reaching out to and push my stomach. In the back and forth tugging, she suddenly pushed me away and fell backward, her head hitting the door frame hard. Chris, who had returned, strode in, his eyes blazing with fire. Ashley, how dare you? The stinging pain in my palm and the discomfort in my lower abdomen made my already dizzy head even dizzier. Instinctively, I called out to Chris for help. Chris, my head is so dizzy, I feel so uncomfortable, take me to the hospital. Before I could finish speaking, I was interrupted by Jane's painful moans. Ugh, Chris, it hurts so much, my stomach hurts so much, my head hurts too, what should I do? I was just trying to persuade Ashley to listen to you more, and she got angry at me. Chris, am I going to die? I was stunned and retorted, it's not like that, it was her. Still pretending. Chris angrily interrupted me, looking at me as if he wanted to tear me to pieces on the spot. Ashley, I misjudged you. You've disappointed me too much. Chris picked up Jane and walked out, comforting her as he walked. Don't be afraid, Jane, I'm here, I won't let anything happen to you. Even though I was already disheartened, Chris's attitude of unhesitatingly believing Jane and abandoning me still stung my heart. I barely managed to sit up, my eyelids feeling as heavy as 1,000 pounds, sinking. I didn't know what the hospital said, but I was locked in the room. 2 hours later, I was forcibly taken to the hospital by Chris's men, who rolled up my sleeves and pushed me in front of the doctor. Chris sat to the side, his aura cold. Draw. The nurse gasped, asking me tremblingly. Ms. Lynn, Ms. Doe is hemorrhaging due to a miscarriage, and the hospital's blood bank is running low, so. I understood. Because Jane and I both had type B blood, Chris brought me over. I looked at Chris with a cold face. I'm pregnant, I can't have a lot of blood drawn. Unexpectedly, Chris just glanced at me coldly, and the words he spoke made me feel like I had fallen into an ice cave. You're going to abort it in a couple of days anyway, what's the big deal? If we can't save Jane, I'll make you experience the pain of an abortion too. I was silent and confronted him, the nurse caught in the middle, torn between the two sides. After half a minute, I tugged at the corner of my mouth and compromised. It was the last time. Draw it. Chris and the doctor took away the blood, ignoring my shivering from the cold and pain behind them. A kind-hearted nurse couldn't bear it and helped me to rest. I grabbed her hand. Excuse me, can your hospital book abortions on Saturdays and Sundays? The nurse was stunned and hesitated before nodding. It seems that it is possible. Do you need to book an abortion? I bit my lip and nodded hard, trying to keep myself awake. Didn't Chris want this child? Okay, then I'll listen to him. On the day I booked the surgery, Chris happened to be taking Jane home from the hospital. When I met Jane in the hospital restroom, she saw me. She was putting on lipstick in front of the mirror, with the attitude of a victor. Ashley, my experiment was successful. To thank you for your cooperation, Chris will take you for surgery this afternoon, and I'll bring you a gift to see you. That gift is very special. You'll like it, look forward to it. She walked out in low heels, interlocking fingers with Chris at the hospital entrance, and getting into the car. I didn't stop either, turning around and walking towards the obstetrics and gynecology department. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Chris walked into the new house with Jane, but didn't see me. Chris frowned, asking the housekeeper unhappily, "Where is she?" The new housekeeper didn't know the rules of the Smith family and answered a little fearfully. "Mrs. Smith came back here yesterday and slept for a while, then didn't come back again. Mrs. Smith also said that she put what you wanted most in the bedroom, and asked you to open it yourself." Jane clicked her tongue impatiently. What is she up to? Still throwing a tantrum at this time? Chris pursed his lips and strode upstairs. In the empty bedroom, a file bag lay quietly on the bed. The white paper inside had been pulled out, revealing the large words "divorce agreement" at the top. Chris's eyebrows twitched, and he rushed over to pull out the agreement. A shot of anesthetic was injected into the back of my hand, and when I woke up again, I was lying on a hospital bed outside the operating room. The nurse reminded me to buy heating pads and some medicine from the vending machine, and also kindly handed me a slightly thicker coat. After regaining my strength, I didn't hesitate, took the things and walked to the airport. Back then, Grandpa Smith helped me solve the medical expenses for my father's special medicine, but because my father was seriously ill, the specialist doctor for rare diseases here was studying abroad at the time. After thinking it over again and again, my parents decided to transfer to America for treatment, and the family business also moved there. I didn't expect that this treatment would last for 5 years. I happily called my parents the night I found out I was pregnant, and it just so happened that my father's condition had completely stabilized, although he still had to rely on medication to maintain it. My parents and I cried tears of joy over the phone. At that time, I also said that I would go abroad to see them when I had time. I didn't expect. I smiled self-deprecatingly and covered my stomach. It's okay, I won't have to be separated from my parents anymore. Before boarding the plane, I edited the recent events into a message and sent it to my mother, and sent a photo of the boarding time of the flight. I didn't expect that after 5 years, Grandpa Smith would contact me again. His voice was the same as 5 years ago, but his words were a little choked up. "I know about you and Chris. Alas, our Smith family is sore for you, but I still have to ask you, Ash, have you thought about divorcing Chris? He's looking for you everywhere now. Maybe he's realized he's gone too far." I interrupted Grandpa's words, and I was very calm. "Grandpa, I've thought it through. Back then, you found me and said that you wanted me to save Chris's life, you could help me. I did it, and I'm tired. I don't want to be entangled with him anymore. He loves Jane. Maybe you should find someone who looks like Jane to be by his side. Maybe that way he will truly settle down." After ending the call, I turned off my phone. Grandpa told me that Chris had searched all the hospitals and was looking for me like crazy, saying that he had to find me and ask me for an explanation. Jane followed behind him. No matter how she tried to persuade him, Chris was unmoved. He was only clutching the signed divorce agreement in his hand. The last names on the agreement were his and Ashley's. The words Ashley were newly written, and the ink hadn't even dried, while his were a little old. Although they were well preserved, you could see that they were a little old. He suddenly remembered those 3 years after he and Ashley got married. After Jane passed away, he was in a daze all day long, and it was Ashley's appearance that made him slowly look forward to life again. When did it start to change? When did he sign the divorce agreement? He didn't remember. He didn't have a single memory of these things. Angry and anxious, he hit his head hard twice. Frustrated emotions enveloped him, and no one dared to step forward to persuade him. After a long time, Jane tremblingly reached out to pull him. It's too late, Chris, let's go back. Maybe Ashley just doesn't want to abort the child and deliberately hid. She doesn't have much money on her, maybe she'll be back in a few days. Chris looked at this face and suddenly felt that the words that came out of this mouth were so annoying. The hospital showed the surveillance footage too. Prove that Ashley did enter the operating room, and also filmed Ashley sleeping on the hospital bed outside the operating room for 3 hours before waking up from the anesthesia. Finally, Ashley also bought medicine and abdominal warming patches before staggering out of the hospital. Are you telling me now that all of this was directed and acted by Ashley? Jane, how come I never noticed before that you have so little empathy? Jane was stunned and looked at Chris in disbelief. She wanted to refute his last sentence, opened her mouth, but didn't know how to refute it, because she didn't sympathize with Ashley. If it wasn't for Ashley, Chris should have married her in the first place. Her relationship with Jane was very ordinary, at least that's how she saw it. She didn't understand why Jane would tell Chris to take care of her after her death, but if the opportunity was offered to her, why not cherish it? The news of Jane's death from illness spread to America, and she immediately filed for divorce from her husband. But her husband wouldn't allow it, so she wasted some time on the divorce. Unexpectedly, when her husband finally took the bait and cheated on her, and she returned home with the divorce lawsuit, Chris had remarried. And married a lowly woman from a small family that she had never heard of. In this way, she lost both her wife and her soldiers. How could she be willing? So she had to stay by Chris's side. She had to rely on this face that looked like Jane to drive Ashley away. Now that she was about to get her wish, how could she give up easily? No, Chris, you misunderstand me. I just think Ashley is calculating, and I'm afraid you'll be deceived by her again. That's why I overthought things. I'm sorry, Chris, it's my fault. Let's keep looking, maybe Ashley is resting in some hotel. After all, she just had surgery, didn't she? Jane took a step back to move forward, and Chris's expression finally softened, but his voice was still cold and full of fatigue. You should go back and rest. Her affairs are my concern, you don't need to worry about it. Jane was unwilling and bit her lip, trying to say something, but Chris directly ordered someone to send her back. Before she got into the car, Chris's scrutinizing gaze fell on her, scaring her into a cold sweat. Chris didn't know why he was looking at his little sister like this. Yes, in his heart, he only treated Jane as a little sister, as his sister-in-law. That night, a few days ago, on the 3rd floor was the only and last absurd time. He missed Jane so much, But afterwards, he also suspected Jane's motives for deliberately imitating Jane to seduce him. But his thoughts were disrupted by the conflict between Ashley and Jane. Now that he thought about it, Jane was probably not simple either. Chris had a headache. Suddenly, he thought of someone, Grandpa. That's right. Grandpa must know Ashley's whereabouts. He was the one who found Ashley and placed her by his side in the first place. When Chris arrived at the Smith family estate, Grandpa Smith was reprimanding housekeeper Lucy and the others, and even Jane was among them. Seeing Chris, Jane cried for help. Chris, save me, my stomach hurts so much, I just had an abortion. Hesitating, Grandpa Smith tapped his cane forcefully. You still have the nerve to say that. How could Jane have a sister like you? Do you think I, an old man, don't know about the dirty things you've done? Do you think that just because you've bribed the housekeepers, they'll work for you forever? Chris's eyelids twitched. Grandpa, what do you mean by that? Grandpa Smith snorted coldly and ordered someone to bring housekeeper Lucy forward. Housekeeper Lucy begged for mercy, and under Grandpa's pressure, she also told about how she had looked down on and disrespected Ashley overtly and covertly for the past 5 years. She also revealed the truth about Ashley seeing Chris and Jane together, as well as Jane's abortion. If each word Chris heard, his steps faltered more and more. At the end, he grabbed Jane's collar in anger. You dare to deceive me and frame Ashley like this? How dare you? How dare you? Jane shook her head in horror, wanting to defend herself. Grandpa Smith sighed and finally brought his cane down on Chris's back. I'm the one who let Ashley down. You two got along well after you got married, and I thought you would protect her, but I didn't expect. Alas. Chris's eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. He wished he could strangle Jane on the spot. Ashley is my wife. How dare you collude with the housekeepers to treat her like this? No, Chris, let me explain. Grandpa Smith snorted coldly and directly ordered someone to cover her mouth. The evidence is conclusive, what's there to explain? Noisy. He looked at his beloved grandson, who had lost his usual kindness. What are you acting like this for? Didn't you personally sign the divorce papers and throw them at her? Didn't you personally make the appointment for the abortion consent form for her? Do you think you can get her back by losing your temper and interrogating people here? Can you make her change her mind? Chris's face was pale, and his back was bent. I. He slapped himself in frustration and stood in the cold wind for a long time, unable to recover. On the other side, the plane I was on finally landed. The airport at 3 in the morning brought not only drowsiness but also a biting cold wind. Mom's eyes were red, and she quickly put a heavy cotton coat on me, and I felt a little warmer. My silly daughter, you have to take care of yourself during the postpartum period after an abortion. What if you get sick and it's uncomfortable when the wind blows in the future? Listening to Mom's caring words, the grievances in my heart could no longer be suppressed. In a corner of the airport, there was only my suppressed and sad crying. I hugged Mom and cried for a long time, as if I wanted to cry out all the grievances I had suffered in this marriage. By the end, my voice was hoarse. Honestly, I no longer cared about what happened at the Smith family estate here. I was disheartened and no longer had any attachment to Chris. Mom, let's go, I want to see Dad. After 5 years, Dad had lost a lot of weight and had a lot more gray hair. He looked at me with red eyes, constantly patting my shoulder to comfort me. It's my fault. If it wasn't for my poor management and illness, I wouldn't have burdened you and made you suffer. I held back my tears and shook my head repeatedly. It's all over, Dad. I just want to stay with you and Mom from now on, and I don't want to be separated from you again. My parents took me back home. Because I had just had an abortion, my mom specially arranged a month of nutritious meals for me, considering my health. I didn't want to waste a month doing nothing, so I took the initiative to help Dad share the company's affairs, starting with some chores. On the day I finished my postpartum period, I was happy to receive the divorce papers sent by Grandpa Smith. I was completely free, but I didn't expect Chris to come to my door after receiving the divorce papers. He knelt silently at the door, not saying a word, no matter how much my parents scolded or tried to drive him away. He would only say a word or two when he saw me. Ash, I was confused. Give me another chance, let me pursue you, okay? Ash, I've already lost Jane, I can't lose you again. I didn't feel anything about this. My parents were worried that his appearance would affect my current state, but I just shook my head lightly. Mom and Dad, don't worry about me, and don't worry about him. He will leave naturally when he can't hold on anymore. No one can go without food or drink for more than 3 days. Sure enough, before the 3rd day, Chris's figure disappeared, leaving only his assistant standing at the door. Ms. Lynn, Chris suddenly felt unwell and fainted last night, and he's in the hospital now. Can you go and see him? I ignored him expressionlessly, not taking his words to heart. On the way to the company, I took the initiative to contact Jane. I knew that with Jane's personality, she would never give up on Chris easily, otherwise, she wouldn't have been entangled with Chris until the divorce papers were issued before she could find time to come to me. But I didn't expect that the first thing she did after going abroad was to come and see me. She sat in front of me, no longer with the smug look she had before, and even looked a little frightened. The coffee in front of her had gone cold, and she glared at me unhappily. I will take Chris back. Since you two are divorced, please live far away and stop bothering him, okay? I was amused by her words. It seemed that she hadn't been able to marry Chris as she wished after I left. Don't you have eyes? Which dog eye of yours saw me bothering him? How dare you talk to me like that? Jane looked at me, her eyes full of anger. I took a sip of coffee calmly. Honestly, you're nothing like your sister. What? I tore apart and crushed her disguise of many years. Apart from this face, you and your sister have nothing in common. You are not even worth a strand of your sister's hair. Once, I had seen Jane. It was rumored in high society that the Smith family and the Doe family, who were well matched, had raised a pair of golden boys and jade girls, and this was referring to Chris and Jane. Unlike Jane's arrogance, Jane was really like the bright moon in the sky, clean, pure, and charming. Honestly, apart from her appearance, Jane was nothing like Jane. I didn't know why Chris could mistake Jane for Jane. Even though he loved Jane so much, he couldn't tell the two sisters apart as well as an outsider like me. The reason might be that Jane had never loved Chris. Yes, she didn't love Chris, so she was obedient to Chris, without any emotio. And didn't care at all. The more you can't get, the more you itch, so Chris would never forget her after her depression and death. In the end, Chris didn't love her that much either, otherwise, he should have been able to distinguish between Jane and Jane better than outsiders. How could he have regarded Jane as Jane and even slept with her? As for Jane, the pain of her life was that she could never compare to Jane, who had already passed away, in the eyes of others. The living cannot compete with the dead. Jane was furious, but she couldn't do anything to me, because Chris would no longer tolerate her unconditionally as before. If she wasn't careful, she would be immediately arrested and sent back here to marry a playboy 10 years older than her. She finally escaped, she must not go back. Who knew if that playboy had any STDs or anything? I smiled, paid the bill, and left. So, this is what it feels like to step on the sore spot of someone you hate. Chris waited palely next to the coffee shop. He pursed his lips and glanced at Jane lightly. I will have someone send her back here overnight, and I won't let her bother you again in the future. I nodded and suddenly said, you should go back too, Chris. Let's just leave it at that. You didn't love me that much, did you? This person was more selfish than I thought. He just couldn't accept that the always docile me had escaped his control. His lips trembled. But, I treated you badly, and I even let you have an abortion, and I condoned others disrespecting you. I haven't paid you back what I owe you. I interrupted her sharply. I don't need it. I don't need this hypocritical compensation. It's troublesome, let's not see each other again in the future. Maybe my words worked, or maybe Chris's impulse had finally passed, and he didn't bother me again. 3 years later, my parents and I intended to transfer the company's business back to America. When I brought the bidding project to the venue, ready to reopen He market here, I saw Chris again. He was more stable and also a lot gloomier. As soon as Chris saw that his bidding opponent was me, he immediately decided to give up bidding and let me profit. I refused. I don't need it, let's compete fairly. I will make you lose convincingly. I had made full preparations, but it was meaningless. I narrowly won Chris by a notch. I happily shared the good news with my parents, but at the same time, I also received Chris's congratulations. He was even happier than I was. Congratulations. Ashley, I miss you so much. He said the last few words very softly, and I pretended not to hear them. Thank you. Before leaving, he held out his hand to me. Can I hug you again? He looked at me with longing, his eyes full of affection. I refused him again with silence. He smiled bitterly and lowered his hand. Goodbye. I left in high heels, but I heard others whispering at the door. It turned out that Grandpa Smith had passed away 3 years ago. After his death, several people in the Smith family who had power quarreled endlessly, and in the end, they divided up the Smith family's assets. And Chris, the grandson that Grandpa Smith loved the most, only received a corner of the Smith family's business. This bidding was a gamble for Chris with all his assets. If he won, he could return to his former position, but if he lost, he would go bankrupt. I turned back to look at Chris. he was still standing there, smiling bitterly. I pursed my lips, but in the end, I was pulled back by the phone in my hand. Hello, Mom, I'm back now, right? Then I'll buy some drinks and come back to celebrate together. I stepped out, no longer caring about the people or things behind me. Anyway, it had nothing to do with me. Chris and I had broken up 3 years ago.